You're listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma, and I'm your host, Trish Close. Nori De Vega on the podcast today. Lots of people know her on Instagram as Nom Nom Nori. She's a food blogger, advocate really, for so many of Portland's independent restaurants. Co-founder of Tikim, which means to taste in Tagalog. It's a concept inspired by Nori and two of her pals to further the Filipino-American narrative by sharing their experiences through so many things, including food. Yes, she is a foodie, and yes, we get along fabulously. I met Nori at the Women in Wine conference in July, and we just hit it off right away. There's just certain people out there that you connect with, and she's one of them. In this interview, she talks a lot about growing up in two different places. She was born in Manila, but family lived a lot in Reno, Nevada. She explains why. She talks about starting up Nom Nom Nori during the pandemic as a way to really support some of her favorite restaurants and places for fear that they were going to shut down. So she was sharing where she was getting dinner and who had the best takeout. And this has really blossomed into something beautiful. Nori reminds me of that high school friend that you can't stop talking to or laughing with, and you just want to know more and more and more. She's very intentional with her words and her stories, and we talk a lot about food, of course, and family, and some challenges that, she's faced and how she's overcome them. And I just feel so lucky, grateful that this rad human has chosen to live in the Pacific Northwest with me. Here's Nori De Vega. I washed my hair for you this morning.
Oh, amazing. I also washed my hair. Just a couple of clean babes.
Two clean babes on a little podcast. I love it. I learned so much about you, Nori De Vega, and I'm so excited to talk to you. You've been through a few things, but you've also just been pushing forward. Pushing forward is kind of like the theme I get from you. Would that be accurate?
I mean, I guess, yeah. I don't know how to do anything, but I think it's just we do what we know.
Amen to that. Okay, I'm going to introduce you properly.
Okay.
First, I have to say, we met at the Women in Wine conference earlier this year in July. A very warm day of July.
Such a warm day. Oh my goodness. But, it was also a warm welcome into that world.
For sure. You are the co-founder, and please tell me if I'm mispronouncing this. Tikim.
Tikim.
Tikim?
Tikim.
Tikim.
So, yeah, there you go.
Tikim.
Mm-hmm.
And it means to taste in Tagalog.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Tagalog. Co-founder, right? There's three of you who founded?
Yes.
Okay. Food blogger. You're also an advocate for Portland's independent restaurants. You've collaborated and consulted with some pretty badass chefs and restaurateurs. You have a very popular, an amazing Instagram profile, Nom Nom Nori. Did I leave anything out?
I mean, the newest thing and how you found me, I have been an advocate for independent restaurants in the Portland area, but even more recently, I've been an advocate for Oregon wine and the representation within Oregon wine. So it's been a really exciting, addition to the things I'm interested in.
And it's also, speaking of Oregon wine, it's one of these things, you and I know how incredibly wonderful the wineries of Oregon are. A lot of people out there don't. They don't really know who we are, what we're about. I'm definitely on a mission to promote Oregon wineries as much as I can. And there's part of me that's like, do I want the secret to get out to everybody?
That's like a very Oregon way, I feel like, right? Like regionally. I'm not from here, but I always tell people that it's no surprise to me that Oregonians either stay here or leave and come back, because why would you leave?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Narnia. It's so ideal here. Idyllic.
It is. And there is this sense of, I've been born and raised here, or I was born here and I came back, and, and I get it. I absolutely get it. And there is part of me that's like, I want to share all of this with everybody. But then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I want to keep this all to myself. I'm selfish.
Exactly.
Nori, where are you from originally? I know it's kind of two spots, right?
Yes, yeah. I was born in Manila, Philippines, which is the capital city of the Philippines. It's metropolitan. It's one of the most densely populated cities in the world. I'm the youngest of four, and the reason why I have another hometown is because I was born with asthma, really severe asthma as a kid, and pretty much the doctor had to give my mom like a come to Jesus talk and just say, hey, you need to move her somewhere with less pollution and drier climate if you want her to have a semblance of a good quality of life. So we ended up in Reno, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole family moved to Reno, Nevada, um, to give me that quality of life. And I also have an aunt there, so it's not like it was just kind of like, let's pick a desert city. It's more of a town. So I spent really my formative years in between Reno, Nevada and Manila, Philippines. So I would say, what I call, my hometown is two
Sure.
hometowns.
Yeah. How do you think that living in both, because you guys went back home to Manila a lot, right? Growing up.
Yes, yes.
How would you say those two places shaped who you are?
Um, I feel like what it's shaped me to be how I am in that I can navigate through ambiguity and unknown spaces really well. And I think in my adulthood, I've realized that not everybody has that ability to adapt as instantly as I do. I didn't know this was a superpower. But I've had to navigate spaces that are so vastly different. Even how you speak to other people are different, how you address other people are different. And it was just part of life for me. So I understand that, like, not only do I think it's an advantage to be bilingual, um, not just in language, but also in just ability to exist and just kind of like move through the motions of life. I've been doing that since as long as I can remember. And so I've taken that in my career and my personal life. So I really think it's helped shape me to be somebody that can really just navigate new spaces much more easily, maybe than others would.
Interesting. I went to three different high schools growing up and moved schools and districts, so I was forced to adapt, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you're forced to just kind of make friends, and I think that's definitely one of my strengths now as an adult is my husband says I can talk to anybody. No one's a stranger in my world. Like I can talk to anyone and get to know you within 5 minutes and you're a pal. And I think that's a good character trait to have.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm because the moment I met you, I'm like, hello, my old friend Trish, even though we just met.
Yeah, I know.
So, yeah, you do have that.
I do think also though there are just people in this world that you instantly connect with. You instantly just go, "Oh, I like her. We're going to be friends." And that was definitely most definitely you, for sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think it's important to, growing up being in two different very different places, right? From Manila to Reno, Nevada, very very different. You appreciate other cultures. You appreciate other people and traditions and all of those things that go along with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so one of the things that, um, when people are like, tell me about yourself, one of the things that I pride myself to be is I'm somewhat of a collector of stories.
Mm.
Um, I think that, like everybody's story is worth knowing. And just like I also find it fascinating what people are either comfortable or uncomfortable sharing and the pace. And so, I just think that everything and everybody has a story to
Mm-hmm.
it. And so, yeah, I just definitely have been really enjoying this journey so far, just collecting these stories.
For sure. I think it also shows us how very similar we are, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We really are
Fundamentally.
very much more similar than we are different when we start to learn and listen to all these stories. So the youngest of four,
Hmm.
four siblings. There's four of you.
Hmm.
Okay, so you were the baby. I'm the baby. It's the best.
The best. It really is.
It is truly the best. Did you guys get along growing up?
Yes and no. I mean, so in my culture, um it's pretty normal to have sort of like the hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
eldest to youngest. it's definitely, it stems from, like even like our oldest sibling is, we view her as like a third parent, right?
Right.
And so like the respect level, like you literally don't talk back to your oldest sister. Like it's that kind of dynamic. It's very different from when I moved to the States and I'm like, you said what to your sister? Or my
Yeah.
God, you talk back to your mom. Like, like things like that were like so shocking. And it was actually what ended up like appealing to me with American cultures. I feel like there's a level of like liberation in expressing yourself here that isn't necessarily something that was the norm for me growing up.
Mhm.
We didn't talk about feelings, like that's not, you don't talk about your feelings necessarily. You don't, um, even if you don't agree with your eldest sister or older brother or your parents, you don't get to push back.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was at least my upbringing. But otherwise, being the youngest is so much fun, like I feel like I developed my communication skills really quickly because if you have three older siblings that are talking and reading and all that, it was bound to happen that I would be talking and reading super early. And so I think from like a learning perspective, it was really good. And like growing up, there's a whole generation between my oldest sister and my older brother and me. My
Mhm.
oldest sister is 11 years older than I am. My brother is 10 years older than I am.
Wow.
So it's a whole generation, right? And so I would say that like when I was a kid, we didn't have necessarily like an established relationship.
Mhm.
It was more so just a relationship of respect and reverence of them, looking up to them. But I wouldn't say that like we necessarily got to know each other growing up. And then my sister, who I consider my best friend, she's 3.5 years older than I am. She and have always been close in fighting all the time and bickering and literally like pulling each other's hair to just like literally just she is my best friend. But the older I get, the more like the more close that my siblings and I overall have gotten,
Mhm.
especially after my parents died.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. There's something I read about you at the conference. You said the fire in your soul comes from your mother. I'm reading this, by the way, everyone. These are your words. As her legacy, your purpose to make others feel valued, empowered, and well fed. When did you lose your mom?
I lost my mom in 2018.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so not that long ago in the grand
No.
scheme of things. She died in the end of July 2018. My dad died just a little bit before her in 2015 at the end of October. And I would say that, obviously like nothing can prepare you for the loss of a
Mm-mm.
parent. Um, but, like losing my dad, I always tell people that, that definitely shattered my world. And I didn't know a grief as deep as that. And then when I lost my mom, like it shattered me. And so it was one of those things that I didn't realize, I didn't realize I was capable of that level of sadness,
Mm.
and it's I still live with it. Anybody who's ever known grief, I think can relate to this, that it doesn't go away. But I think like as time has passed, it's not so much like, mourning the loss of my mother. It's mourning not being able to experience life with her and sharing with her, right? Like when something bad happens or when something good happens, the first thing I always want to do is call my mom, right? And I
Sure.
can't. Um, so in a way, I channel that to be like, how can I live every day to honor my mother and to make my decisions based on what, she would want for me. So, that's why I think like every decision I make, every mission I take on, it really is in honor of, like my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe the gift that she left me is the fire in my soul continues because I am her daughter.
Amazing. I have a very dear friend who lost a child, and she said grief looks something like two roads. One is grief, one is joy and living life. And she said she realized that you don't necessarily have to take one or the other. They kind of are side by side, right? And so some days you are walking along that path of grief, And then
Hmm.
other days you are walking along the path of just living and being joyful and, all of those things. They kind of they're woven together.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely something that I feel like becomes part of you. It's just another arm, it's another leg. Like it's just something that, it's a foreign object that ends up becoming so part of you. That I at first it was an unwanted guest and now it's my roommate. That's what I always tell people,
Mm,
Like it was just like I don't want you here, it's frustrating when this thing is here,
sure.
and now this thing lives with me.
Yeah.
And so I don't really separate it. Even in my moments of joy, grief is still there.
Do you find also too, you said, this, it is a gift in a sense because she is creating this drive and this fire inside of you to do the things that you're doing. Do you ever have moments where you feel like things are too hard and it's like I don't know if I can do that because it's going to be too hard, and then your your mom comes into your brain and into your heart and you're just like, okay, this.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that one of my mentors mentioned before, that one of the things that drew him to me and that he saw something in me is my fearlessness. And I would say that he's not the first person to call me fearless.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so funny because anytime I hear that, I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm terrified like all the time, But there is a sense of fearlessness in me, especially after losing my mom, that I'm like, nothing, absolutely nothing can hurt me as much as that hurt. So I'm just like, bring it on. Like I'm not scared of rejection. I'm not scared of the word no, and a lot of that comes from, like what else do I have to lose? I lost the my first home. And so, like I think I'm still very risk averse, of course, but I would say that's a lot of that fearlessness stems from that. But I think one of the things that my mom was really good at with all of us kids when she was alive, when we were growing up, is that she instilled in us a confidence that like she didn't do by way of compliments or, like things like that. It wasn't an ego-driven confidence. It was really just an understanding that fundamentally, like what we have inside of us is worthy, is able to do something. Like we're smart. Before we could quantify what smart is as kids, my mother was always telling us we're so smart. Like she would nurture my curiosity. And so, I think that it's a gift that I have been given my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just the loss of her, if anything, just really puts it into practice.
100%. That was so beautifully said. Was food important growing up with mom and dad and siblings?
Yes, I think that like not from like a gourmet sense, like not from like how I experience food today. Like it
Totally.
wasn't, we weren't going to Michelin starred restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Like if anything, my family was more so like, you know, um, where can we get the bang for our buck type of family. But it's funny because, one thing, the beauty of Instagram is I think that people are able to express in social media some of the things that are their experiences in a much broader scale and more public scale that I'm like, holy crap, we were all raised the same, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of those things is like in Asian culture, this token of love that a lot of us have received from our parents who didn't classically say I love you, to us, or I wasn't hugged a lot as a kid type of thing, is the act of cutting fruit. um, it's like it is a universe, and it's so crazy to me that it could be, you could be Vietnamese, you could be Thai, you could be Chinese, Filipino. We all have this memory of our parents cutting fruit for us. And it's just like a little token of love and affection. And so food was how my family has always bonded.
Mm.
My parents owned a transportation company when we were growing up. So they were busy. They were always traveling. They were always gone. We were pretty much all raised by our nannies. Um, but one of the main things that my parents insisted on is if they were in town and it was at the end of the day, we always ate dinner at the table.
Mm.
And it could be like 10 o'clock when they get home. Doesn't matter. We're eating dinner at 10 o'clock.
Hmm.
And you know, that was really where we got to reconnect as a family is over food. And so I think growing up, like food meant love to me because it was really where we were all able to share. One of the principles my mom instilled in us is if you're going to be a stingy person, be stingy about things, never be stingy about food.
Ooh.
Um, and so, just that's the generosity that, comes from really my mom's entire like ethos. It all came back to food on the table.
Yes, my grandmother. I'm from the South, and my grandmother would cook way too much food. Always, she always cooked way too much food, which is what I do now. And
Yeah.
if someone came through the door, there was none of this like, "Oh, you guys are sitting, you're eating dinner. I'll come
Hmm.
back." It was like, "No, no, no. You come on in. You
Right.
fix a plate. We have plenty. Sit with us. Talk to
Hmm.
us. All of those things." And I think it's not like something that was stamped into my brain that I'm like, I'm going to do that too. It's just I naturally do that now
Hmm.
just because. And it's so funny you said cutting up fruit. My husband cuts up our whole existence together. He has cut up apples for me.
Yep.
And
It's a love.
it just occurred to me like that is such a yes, it's such a like token of love to cut up someone's fruit for them. That's
Yeah,
huge.
it's just something so simple, but it
Yeah.
it means it there's in a way like intimacy in that,
Uh-huh.
right? That like it let me prepare this for you.
Right.
This is something that you can eat or open yourself, but like let me do this for you. And it's just so simple and I think that like we take a lot of these types of things for granted, but you know, I also just like in thinking back on like um what like the ways like that like you greet a guest when we like lit when we moved to America. I remember like all my friends always loved coming over, like always, because they would be fed everything and anything. They could
Yes.
have whatever they want. We would always have a whole bunch of snacks. My mom would make a huge meal for them. So like my house is always the favorite house to go to because of that. But it's such a normal thing where I'm from. The first thing you say to somebody when they walk in through your door is, "Have you eaten?"
100%. Yes.
Yes, yes. And even if and we say that kumain ka na ba or kumain na kayo, like like we always ask that question. And it doesn't matter what they say to you. It literally doesn't matter if they say yes, I've eaten or no, I've eaten. You're already fixing them a plate. You're already making them tea. You're already, like offering them something. And that's just part of our culture. And I like didn't realize how prevalent it was until seeing it all over the internet. And I'm like, oh, this wasn't just a me thing or like my aunties or like this wasn't just a Manila thing or a Filipino thing. Like this is a thing. In the South, this happens, right?
Yeah.
Like and basically spending all of my life in America and not in the South and then visiting the South. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, the culture here is so similar to mine.
Yeah, food is a big deal in my family, but that it's do you eat yet? Y'all eat
Yeah.
yet? I mean,
Yep.
that's anybody who walks through the door. It was the same thing. Did you have
Yeah.
dinner? Did you have supper? Did y'all eat?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big deal. So yeah, I do love that idea. And I think thank you for shining a light on that because it truly is a token of love and friendship and fellowship when you go to someone's house and there is this here's all the things I have and I'm going to share them with you.
Yes, yes. I love it.
I do too. I love talking about food and just, traditions and just the things that families do. And again, we find them all, they just kind of intertwine together because we're all so very similar. Um, when did you move to Portland?
2012.
Okay. So family still living in Reno at this time?
No.
Okay.
It's a funny story. Wasn't funny to my family then. So I being the youngest, and the expectations are high in my family on like what you accomplish from a career perspective, school, et cetera. That's first and foremost, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I remember when we moved to the States, I was like, "Hey, mommy, I want to go to this party. My friend, you know, her parents are throwing her a graduation party. Can I go?" And she's like, "A party for what?" Like graduation. It was high school, and she's like, "They're throwing a party for something you for showing up to school." And I was like, "Oh my God, mom."
Snap.
Or
Shots
no,
fired.
no, but really, she was just like so. She was like, I don't
Yeah.
understand that. What is there to celebrate? Did she win awards? Is she valedictorian? And I was like, oh my God, like those were the standards of my family, right?
Okay,
And
I like it.
if you didn't have straight A's, you were treated like you were failing. Like, you know, like it was like
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. It was that level. Like to paint a picture of my siblings, like my oldest sister is a highly successful attorney. She is a really like recognized name there. She has her own law firm. She is Manny Pacquiao's legal counsel. You know, like she is very accomplished.
Okay.
My brother is an engineer. He's the only boy, so there's not a lot of pressure on my brother to necessarily like be my sister's level, right? But then my other sister, she's a doctor. And so it's like, you know, it was always like, well, what are you gonna do? You know, everybody was kind of just like, you know, because my whole family was like, well, she's naturally smart. So, you know, like even though she, you know, she messes around a lot and like, you know, gets a lot of hobbies, all of this, and she's creative, she'll figure it out. And, you know, kind of just like gave me the grace to like figure it out. And it was almost like it was like a blind box. They were like, is she gonna go to law school or is she gonna go to med school, right? And I kind of like withheld, like, you know, I'm exploring. Graduated college. Everybody had already left at this point. They were already back home. My family did not love living in the States. Like,
Mm.
nobody in my family loved living in the States. They were like, this place is not for us. It doesn't matter how much money you make or how much education you have. You know, somehow somebody will find you and treat you poorly here. And they didn't love that. And so they all left. I mean, not that I love that, but I have a tolerance for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they all left, went back home to Manila, and I was the only one left in Reno. And it was because I was graduating college with the intent of me going to graduate school. Well, graduated and was like, well, I'm gonna pack my Prius of everything I can pack into it and then drive up to Portland and move there and use it as a stepping stone to move to a big city, to New York City, and then figure out if I want to go to grad school from there. Only person that knew was my aunt, who I was living with at the time. Um, Couple months later, my mom catches wind that I moved. And then she was just like, what are you doing? Like literally did not tell my family. This is my biggest rebellion. You know, we are, all of us are not particularly rebellious. But that was my biggest rebellion is I just made that decision for myself and moved up here, not knowing anybody, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
rented a room with a single dad and his kids. Like I found on Craigslist, literally nightmare. But you know, my mom towards like the end of her days, we had a very frank conversation. And one of the things that she said to me, she was just like, um, that she would have done the same thing.
Mm.
Um, because my mom and I are more similar than, you know, than she would have admitted when I was younger. And even my siblings, the older we get, the more they're like, oh my goodness, you're exactly mommy.
Right.
But yeah, so that was what happened when I moved over here. My family did not know.
Okay. All right. What a yeah, what a way to tell them. So what your plans, I mean you kind of said this, but you know, use it as a jumping off point, but did you just when you were in Portland and you said this was like what, 2012-ish? So
Yes.
this was a pretty fantastic time to live in
Mhm.
Portland, Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what were your plans? What were you going to do? What did you do?
I had no plans.
Mm,
That's the thing. It's so unlike me because I'm like pretty type A. I
yeah.
have Excel spreadsheets of my exact itinerary to the hour of when we travel. Like you can ask my husband, our next Paris trip, it's literally like I schedule in freestyle hours, you know, like that's
Nice.
spontaneity right there is that. So that's as spontaneous as I get. But
Uh,
I had no plan. I literally, like I said, packed up a little 2001 Prius with as much as I could pack into it. um, which wasn't much, just my clothes mostly. I slept on the floor for the first couple months I lived here.
Oh
I
my
didn't even have a
gosh.
bed. Um, I had no plan. And I don't know what called me to do this and so
Mm.
urgently. I barely had any money to my name, like had just enough for like a security deposit for the room I'm renting and rent. Um, but like something called me up here and really like what attracted me to Portland was when I visited, I really loved how it rained. Like it's rain that I didn't experience before. It's that cold Pacific Northwest sprinkle.
Yeah.
Where everything has a gray filter
Hmm.
to it. I come from a tropical place where like rain means rain. It's tropical, it's thunderstorms,
Hmm.
it's, typhoons. Like that's the kind of rain I'm familiar with. And then living in Reno, Nevada, it's like you get that rare desert rain,
Yeah.
right? It was either snow or sunshine. That's
Right.
what I got. And so the weather was something I was really fascinated with and found comfort in and still do. I'm a weird Portlander and Oregonian that I'm like, when is it going to start raining? I need
Hmm.
it.
That's
And the
neat.
food,
That's
I
neat.
love it. I
Hmm.
really love it.
Hmm.
Um, and then of course the food, like for me, I've always loved food, but I never like spent a ton of money on food, I would say, like growing up. And then how much delicious food you can get in Portland for not that much money and like
Right.
the level of cooking. It drew me here.
Hmm.
I couldn't get enough of it. And so that was the reason why I chose Portland, Oregon. Also, it was drivable. While yes, I was relying on like really spotty Apple Maps at this time, not great. I had like an iPhone 3GS or something like that. Um, it should have been like a 9 hour drive, but it ended up would always take me like 10 and a half or 11 hours. Uh, because I don't know. But like it was drivable. I didn't need to have thousands of dollars in my name to live like I would in New York City. So to me, it was a reasonable stepping stone.
Yeah.
Uh, but then Portland and Oregon and like in general has been so good to me that I never left.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that. I moved here in 2002
Yeah,
with the idea to move
to leave.
on, move up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens, right? It gets you. And I think what I love about Oregon and Portland too, Portland is such a digestible city, I feel like. It's not
Mhm.
overwhelming, but it's big enough that you could get lost in it in a good way.
Yes.
Um, and I just feel like Oregon, I always have said if the state of Oregon just broke off from everybody, we would be just fine. We would be great.
We have water.
Some of the best water on the planet.
That's water. Yes.
It's a very sustainable feeling here too. And I just people, I think you said this when you tell someone else, "Oh, I'm from Oregon," their eyes light up.
Hmm.
Did
Hmm.
you say that? I think you said that.
Mm-mm.
I thought you did. Okay. Well, someone said it. And I was
Someone,
like, that's good. It's true. It's really true.
yeah.
When you tell
Yeah.
people, oh, I live in Oregon, they're like, oh, there's really good things out there. And I'm like, oh, the best things are out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I always feel like, and maybe it's because, I'm not from Oregon and also not from this country.
Mm-hmm.
I get the response of either like, oh, that's cool. What's that like? And then obviously there's like the media stuff about Portland, right? Like where people are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yes, of course I'm okay. Um, but there's also I get the response of where is that?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I have a lot of folks that, only know the US to be either San Francisco, LA, or New York City, like that, or Chicago. Like that's all they know of America.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I have no idea what that is. What is an Oregon? Where is an Oregon?
What's
And
in
so
Oregon?
what's an Oregon? Where is that? Like, I mean, even my family was just like, where is Oregon? Like told them and yeah.
Like upper left corner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we just say north of California.
Right.
They're like, okay,
Got it.
cool.
Got it. Obviously though, you not only fell in love with the city, but it seems like you found a community in Portland too.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that like I've lived a few lives since my time here of just like finding community. I would say that, when I first moved up here, I would say that the majority of my friends, were local artists, creatives, designers, a lot of folks from Nike, um, DJs, etc. And then like bartenders, because I was in the industry for a while. And then when I met my now husband, it's kind of like evolved into like his circle of friends, folks that, are from Oregon or went to University of Oregon because he went to U of O. Like kind of my community changed then.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, like work, I started when I in effect retired from service industry and moved into corporate, obviously things change. I'm making friends with people who also have, a Monday to Friday, et cetera. So that changed. And then I would say that during the pandemic, it was in 2020, that I would say is like where I truly found community.
Mm.
And I've never, I mean, just like you, it doesn't cost me any extra calories to make a new friend. So I think like no matter where I am, I will find, a sense of community and
Yeah.
friendship. But I would say that the pandemic was what caused me to really, and I think this is like across the board, not just me individually, but it kind of helped all of us reprioritize and like really focus on like what's important to us fundamentally and connect with people that have similar principles and values. Um, and a lot of that is because we had these devices that we were all attached to in isolation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of call, the 2020s time sort of like a hyperbolic chamber of friendship and connection. Like I have never formed such deep connections with people as quickly as I have since 2020.
Yeah.
And even is till today, right? And I think it's really benefited me because I just feel like I know who I vibe with. Um, and then just in food, I would say since 2020 and starting Nom Nom Nori, with like the full intent of, kind of addressing a gap because food journalism completely stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Like it halted. Nobody was writing articles. Nobody was, you know, creating anything to tell people like this is the state of the industry right now. This is who's open. This is what they're offering. Like nobody was talking about
No.
that. And I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, we just moved into this house. Like, what are we going to do if downtown turns into a ghost town here? And, our market value lowers, like things like that. Then I'm
Yeah.
like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna lose what makes Portland so special. So I started Nom Nom Nori Instagram and just started posting about, where I was getting takeout. But it definitely blew up much more than I thought it would. And if anything, it just like opened the doors to meet the people behind my favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of that thing that um, kind of gave us a reason to talk, and so I found connection within the food community here in Portland, restaurant owners, restaurant workers, etc., other creatives. And then through that, really finding community also in like Oregon wine. And that's so recent. That was really when Visit McMinnville, the DMO for McMinnville, um, contracted me to create a video for them in November 2022. So it's that recent that really I realized, oh, there are a whole group of people that I could meet and connect with. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been a gift. So that's really, I think I've found my community on my own terms through food.
Yeah. My husband and I have been talking about community a lot lately. Like, who is our community? Because I do think you go through different waves of friends and friendships and groups of people. And this may sound absolutely crazy, and I understand the pandemic was awful. It was a horrible time in our history, but there are times where I miss it a little bit because I miss the quiet, and I
Yes.
miss the the times where we were prioritizing what was important. And we had groups of friends, pockets, where we would go visit in our little bubbles and we would kind
Yeah.
of be separated, but we would have those friendships and we would drink wine and we would have food together in a safe way. And I miss that. I miss that quiet part of life.
I feel like the pandemic, while we were all terrified and it was awful, kind of forced all of us to have a little bit more intentionality and like
Yep.
our connection with, and we cherish those connections a lot
Yep.
more because we couldn't just have them, right? Like I mean, I am remembering 2019 being such a dynamic year. We were traveling, we were, doing all of these things. We see people every day, it from everything, including media, like it just, you take it for granted.
Hmm.
And then during the pandemic, you had to be so mindful about the t like how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, that like I think it instilled in all of us like this like need to really just like it's like just a sense of mindfulness that like I think didn't exist before because we were forced to slow down.
Yep.
And I think it did provide us that gift of like really, really defining your community because you
Hmm.
had to put effort in it. You couldn't just run into them at the gym. You couldn't just run into them at the grocery store or work.
Exactly. And we were all in the same boat. I think that was the other part of it.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
true.
like the playing field kind of leveled out a little bit, and it's like we were truly all in this together. At
Yeah.
least in the very beginning, it really did feel like that. I know there was obviously divisiveness that came later, but in the very beginning, it's like, man, we are all in this together, all of us, the entire planet.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I
just
mean,
wild, wild to think about. Yeah, and so I think with Nom Nom Nori, we chatted about a little bit about this at the conference. It really was just kind of your way to give a shout out to some of your favorite spots and like, hey, they're doing takeout or they're doing a special thing this day. Like, go, this is what I'm eating today. And it's a way of supporting them that turned into something absolutely incredible.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it was like all my friends were asking me where to go anyway. Like I was getting
Yeah.
texts like, where could we do this or that? Or like I remember my first birthday during the pandemic. Like my husband had to find who could potentially like, could do a catering sized, spread. And then we invited like a handful of friends, that were in our pod to come eat
Mm-hmm.
it with us. Like, but I was already the person that my like close circle were like, hey, where should I eat tonight? Who's even open? What's been good? Who offers good takeout? Type of stuff
Yeah.
that like since I'm already that friend, I've always been that friend of like I'll tell you where's good. I'm like, why don't I just make this public? Why
Mm-hmm.
don't I just make this so like I'm already answering these questions via text. I'm already taking pictures of all this. Why don't I just make it public? And I saw it as just like well, I'm already here and this is how I can help. And then the more I got to meet all the people behind all of our food and our beverage, the more I was like, oh, these are people that I want to just help, that I want to root for.
I know. I know. I feel we'll go to big events and the people who I want to hang out with are like, it's always like the people who are doing the work. Like,
I know.
like the chefs or the servers or the winemakers, or it's always the people. I joke, I say it's the help, but it's serious.
Yeah.
Like I like
Yeah.
that's the people who I want. Those are the people I connect with.
Well, I mean, those are the people that give you the experience that you love so much. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think we forget that oftentimes with like I'm in marketing. I'm in the business of marketing. That's what I do as a day job. We get really drawn to like the headliner. We get really drawn to like the face of a company or a brand,
Yep.
right? Really not recognizing that it took X amount of people who touched your experience so many times for you to love it.
Mm-hmm.
A really good example of that is a restaurant. Like you're like, I freaking love this restaurant. It's so great. And then, you get all these headlines of like the chef that got an award or whatever, right? But the chef wasn't the one that greeted you when you walked in the door. The chef wasn't the one that, picked out all of the silverware and polished it for you.
Yep.
The chef wasn't who, cut up the carrots. Like things like that,
Yeah.
that you're like, there were so many people involved in your overall experience that made you fall in love with a place. That I think that's where people kind of forget. And
Mm-hmm.
so I do really believe in just like the power of knowing the people behind the things that you love so much. And it isn't always the most obvious person. But yeah, it's just an appreciation of that and like the desire to like to truly root for them.
Yeah.
And
And we've seen so many times, especially through social media, there's been stories in the media where a restaurant was at risk of shutting down, and then someone who loved that restaurant got on social media and said, go support them, go support them. And
Mhm.
then because there was this outcry of support, the restaurant now is like, oh, okay, we can stay open now. I mean,
Yeah.
you see it all the time. And I think just what you did, maybe it seemed small at the time, but it was such a big deal for, I'm sure, for all of these restaurants that were just so grateful that you just were posting like, hey, they have takeout, or hey, it's really good, fill in the blank, go grab some. I think that's really special.
It's still like the fuel to what I want to talk about today, right? Like I think how I view everything that I do is it's always people first. It's
Mm-hmm.
always the humans first. And I try to tell people, like, I mean, this is even in wine, right? Like during the women in wine thing, I remember Julia Coney was just like, I don't want to go on an Instagram and it's just a bunch of bottle shots. Like, what is that telling me, right? Like, that's just cool, great design, awesome, you know? And there's truth in that because so how I see it, and this is also how I like my methodology, like as a marketer. Like, what would make you choose one thing over the other, right? In my case, I work for a tech company. What would make my technology any different than another? Generally, it's because of really like the vibe to it. And so
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally, it's about community. What makes up community? People, right? So it's going to be people. It's going to be people centric. Um, it's almost like if you look at it from like a church perspective. So if you are X religion and there are like five churches of that X religion in your town, right? And then you've been going to this church since, you were a kid or since you moved there, but then you moved houses across town. You're still going to drive to that church, right? They're all teaching the
Yep.
same stuff about whatever religion you have, the same sermons, it's all going to be the same. But the reason why you go to that church, even though you're driving now 20 minutes across town, was the community that you
Mm-hmm.
created, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same thing from a brand perspective for restaurants, for wine, for everything. Like there was a point before I really took a deep dive into wine that I was just like, holy shit, I cannot drink another Pinot Noir. Like I'm so Pinot Noired out, right? Like I'm just like Pinot Noirs, Pinot Noirs, Pinot Noir. And
Yeah.
Oregon so well and I'm spoiled, but I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
Like I got to that point when I was drinking wine, not really diving into the what, who, whys
Mm-hmm.
of it. But now I'm recognizing that like when you pay a little bit more attention, who made it, how did they make it, where did it come from, type of thing, I'm like, they are so vastly different.
Yeah.
Here I was looking at it from like a surface level, but here, this is why I love this wine specifically. I love the winemaker. I like all of this stuff. It's the same thing with restaurants. I'll go to restaurants where I can make whatever they make the same or even better at home.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to go to that restaurant because of the community of the
Mm-hmm.
people behind it, the overall experience, right? Like I think that that's like kind of what's unique with humans is we do a lot of things that is like required for us to survive, but we do it in a way that is about leisure, right?
Yeah.
Like we are the only species that has restaurants where we congregate to eat, like where somebody else is making it and we congregate to eat. Like we are the only species that does that. But
Right.
every species has to eat, right? I think fundamentally, like what excites me about a story is the person behind it and the people behind it.
Could not agree with you more. I've been preaching this for such a long time in an effort to promote the wine region here. It's like, well, what's the story? Like, tell me something interesting. And, well, we don't really have a lot going on, but this wine that we're making right now, it's, I don't know, wine I've been wanting to make for a decade. And I finally got the great, and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. There
There's
you
a
go.
story.
There's
There's a story.
that's it.
That is the story.
I'm like, we got to get that out. We got to tell people like that's what's going to make people want to come drink this wine and buy a case of it and take it home.
Yeah.
And, and I have winemaker friends who their own philosophies about making wine. And it's like, share that
Mhm.
philosophy with people. That's your story. Like that's what makes you different and unique. Share that.
Right.
And I guarantee you sales will go up. I know it.
Honestly, sometimes like in some of the like, some of the times that I've met the winemaker or like, the whoever is making the wine, even somebody who was, an intern there or whatever. Sometimes like that is what made me find the wine so special is their story. We didn't even talk about wine,
Yeah.
right? Like nobody talked about where it was grown or the soil or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like they shared something as to why they did something.
Mm-hmm.
Like a really good example of that is like Kate Payne Brown told me that when she's tasting wine and she's blending wine, she sort of associates it to shapes. Like
Hmm.
that's just like to me is so interesting. Like things like that you're just like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
This is what makes your when you start to kind of see their viewpoint, you're like, I see why this tastes like this. I
Yeah.
see why you went with this texture as opposed to this, and that was what you were going for. That's what you coaxed out of there. Um, and we don't really like we don't always see that. We don't
Mm-hmm.
get to see that in the bottle. We don't get to see that on the label or on, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think it's really fascinating. We have this thing called social media where we can sort of distill these stories and these messages and like deliver it to other people in
And
hopes that
share.
maybe they taste. Yeah.
Share. Absolutely share 100%. And I also love when I'm reminded of all of the hands, one bottle, all of the hands that have touched the wine in this one bottle. It
Mm-hmm.
really makes me slow down and I'm just overwhelmed almost sometimes, It
Yeah.
like I don't want to be cheesy, but it makes me emotional when I think about like all the people who had a hand in making this one bottle of wine. It's pretty incredible.
Literally the hands, but also I think that's what makes Oregon special as a region
Hmm.
too, right? Like our production levels are so much lower than other wine growing regions, right? Like it's even our largest producers of wine are relatively small scale in comparison to a region like Napa, Sonoma, Burgundy, etc., right?
Yeah.
Like I think that there's a level of like specialization not only in the wine industry here, but farming in general. Like Oregon is so unique.
Yes.
Like the things that are normal here are not normal in other places. Like
Right.
how many, like, I mean, this isn't every place in Oregon, right? Like there is obviously like disparity in food experiences in other regions, but I think overall my experience has been like it doesn't cost me an extra effort to fill my basket full of organic, locally grown things.
Yep. Yeah.
Where like growing up in Reno, like we had to go to Sprouts or we had to go to like, Whole Foods when it was Whole
Sprouts.
Foods. You know what
Oh,
I mean? Like
yeah.
to get that. But here you can go to, Fred Meyer or somewhere else and it's like
Hmm.
it will have like a variety of things that are Oregon grown.
Yeah. And I understand too, there's sometimes we just need to get produce or good foods when we can get them. But why
Mhm.
would I buy garlic from Mexico or Ecuador when I can buy
Right.
garlic from the farmer who's literally 10 miles down the street?
Exactly. We're really spoiled. I think like it is a West Coast thing and specifically I think a Pacific Northwest Coast thing
Yeah.
that we have this kind of access and it's really, really
Hmm.
awesome and worth celebrating. But it's like that with our wine.
Yeah.
Like the fact that I can drive an hour, less than an hour away, honestly, 30 minutes away to
I
Beaverton,
know.
and you can see vines, right? You can go to a winery, you can see where it's made right there. That's really special because it takes just as long in New York City to get from Brooklyn
Hmm.
to Manhattan.
Hmm.
Like we have
Sis-
such access here.
Sister, we're right here. We're right here. I mean, my family calls it's spoilt. Y'all are spoilt out there in Oregon. And I'm like, yeah. And I don't want to
Yeah,
live any other way. I'm sorry. I don't.
right, right. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. They're
No,
absolutely
you are. You are. Like, I mean, my mom will come visit and we'll be at a winery 15 minutes away from my house, 20,
correct.
whatever, 30. And she's just like, I cannot believe you are this close. And I'm like, Mom, they're all around too. And she knows that. She's been out here several times, but just
I
like, it's just amazing. We are just so incredibly lucky to have all of this right here at our little dirty fingertips.
Well, I mean, and it's not a forever thing. That's another thing that I think like
Yeah.
is worth reminding people is just like everything else, it is not always going to be like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? For whatever factor that this gets not taken away but changed,
Yeah.
You know, like that will happen at some point. This is just globalization and all of that, right? Um, for example, like this was probably the experience of folks that lived in Sonoma,
Yeah.
right? Forever. But now you're lucky if you can get property for $1 million.
Right.
Um, I always like tell people like why I stayed here is like Portland is like the last affordable city in affordable major city in the West
Mm-hmm.
Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, like it's Willamette Valley and, you know, like just the wine growing region in the Pacific Northwest, the fact that we can live within 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour from these regions, these, you know, heavily like with a big volume of winemakers and like tourist areas and still be able to afford a house is really, really special.
Mm-hmm.
This is a moment in time that like we should be all celebrating. Like I would hate for somebody who has lived here their whole life to get to a point where, you know, maybe we are as expensive as Napa and Sonoma in these regions and they're like, man, I wish I would have experienced it when
I
it was
know.
not so touristy, right? And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want you to get to that point, so do it
Do it
now.
now. Yeah. Give yourself a hug and then go experience the things.
It's so easy.
It is. It really is. And then I always think about it too. When you go experience these things, you're helping out a family, multiple
Yes.
families. You're helping out all of the families that are, picking the grapes, for instance, or farming land and then creating all of these beautiful experiences for you. Like, yeah, go experience it right now. I want to wrap up just a little bit and get to the final three, but I have to ask you and help me pronounce this again. Tikim. Did I
Tikim.
say it again?
Tikim. So make the I just a little bit more rounded. Tikim.
Tikim.
Hmm.
Okay. It's a concept inspired by three pals, you included,
Hmm.
to further the Filipino-American narrative by sharing experiences
Hmm.
through all sorts of things, right? But mostly food.
Hmm.
Okay. Where'd this idea come from?
It actually came from so just freshly like still in the pandemic. Like we were in the pandemic and there wasn't a ton of like Filipino food in general
Mm,
in the Pacific Northwest. Even when I moved here, I was like, oh my God, do I need to learn how to cook these things myself because I can't just go to a restaurant. Um, and so it actually started off like separately, but like in the same vein, we all connected over Instagram,
mm,
kind of just like finding each other on through the algorithm. And like specifically like, you know, I was already doing Nom Nom Nori, like Trisha, one of the co-founders, she's like big sister to me. She and I connected over that, just bonded over like, you know, food that's delicious, but also just like Filipino culture and just talking, like kind of just like at that time being like, you know, we just miss we just miss it. We didn't realize how much comfort it brought us to like talk about our culture and our food. And then similarly, like Jane and Trisha found each other also like kind of like exchanging recipes. Like, you know, they were both learning, trying to learn and remember how to make things, and they were like exchanging recipes. Um, and then a good friend of ours, Holly, she founded Sabejo, which is a sambal company from like it's they're Singaporean, and it was the same thing. She wanted something that was from home and couldn't find it anywhere, so she was like, I guess I'll just make it myself.
mm,
And but she had like an event that I was invited to, and that was when I officially kind of just like sat down and talked to Trisha just about like, hey, this is something that Holly did. She missed something from home so much that she was just like, I'm just gonna do it myself. So I was like, why can't we do that?
yeah.
We miss the flavors of home so much and the stories of home so much. Why don't we just do this? And like Trisha she's like an ex Nike brand exec. You know, so it's like we talk the same language as far as like
Right.
marketing and brand and all of that. And so we're talking about how like we were like, how can we make it cool for people like us to not be ashamed of our past or like try to assimilate, but also instead like take it back and like find, you know, like be empowered to like celebrate our roots.
Hmm.
So we were just like, why not? And like, you know, I joked and I was like, why don't we do a supper club? I mean, Holly does supper clubs all the time. And she was like, I'm down. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. It was really great to meet another yes person who was just like, why not? Let's just do it. And then in that conversation, you know, like she was like, you know, we were planning on kind of like starting the building blocks of it, she was like, I have a friend, Jane. I talked to her a little bit about it. We've been talking on Instagram and she's interested. And I was like, okay. And then we all met for breakfast one day, and then what Tikim was born. And we all kind of like have our various strengths to have added to it. It started as an idea for a supper club,
Love
but
it.
then we kind of like expanded it. But we did our first supper club, but before that, like we identified that we all had like our various strengths. Like, like Trisha is like she is the best ringleader. Like she is able to make everything a productive meeting. Like she is so good at that. And she's also just like a brand like uh genius. Like she's
Mm-hmm.
just so good at making everything like really beautifully polished and branded and deliverable to an audience. Um, I lose no calories public speaking, as you're aware. So I'm able to like, kind of like be that person to like hype and talk and all that, kind of
Mm-hmm.
create the experience. But I was also a retired bartender, and all three of us cook. So there's that.
Mm.
And then Jane comes from hospitality. Like she went to hospital like just for school in hospitality and cuisine. And so she's classically trained. She's worked in Michelin star kitchens before. She's the GM of arguably one of the most successful catering companies here in Portland.
Nice.
Um, and so, like from an operational perspective, and execution, like that's Jane's superpower. So we all had our like various superpowers that all complemented each other so well that like this thing was born, Tikim, and it really did expand. It grew, and we realized that like our talents were able to be leveraged by our community in many different ways, whether that be sharing stories over media, whether that be helping people with their business plan, helping people with their brand,
Mm.
um, and really helping sort of like take a more informed approach to things to people that are navigating new waters and helping them kind of like, you know, elevate whatever it is that they're doing. So we sort of became like a little mini, guerrilla marketing type of organization that like we just like we were just here to really help our community rise.
I love it. And I'm sure through, because it's the supper club, I mean, pop-up restaurant, is that safe to say? Kind of like,
Kind of. I mean, we did a few supper clubs, some collaborations with other
mm-hmm.
restaurants and chefs. And so it really is, we tell people, I'm like, we're not chefs. We have none of us have the intention. So that's why I hesitate to say we're a pop-up or
Gotcha.
pop-up restaurant. None
Gotcha.
of us have the ambition to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
So
Because you're
because of that,
smart.
I mean, it is not for the faint of
So
heart
much
in a
work.
restaurant that the slim margins are what
Yeah.
scare me.
Yeah. No, for sure. But what I was going to say is through the food though, I'm sure one of my favorite things is when you share food from your family, your culture, you're opening up so much conversation. You're teaching people about flavor, you're teaching people about you, really, and where you came from. And it's just
Right.
it's so beautiful.
There's also like a level of I would say like responsibility
Yeah.
based on because so Filipino cuisine has been quote up and coming for the greater part of over a decade. Right? Like I've heard that Filipino cuisine is up and coming for as long as I can remember. And I'm like, when are we gonna arrive? Right? Like sushi's arrived, like,
Right.
Chinese takeouts arrived, Thai foods arrived. When are we? And we just haven't. Like you
Yeah.
ask people, like one of the things I try um to convey to people that are like, well, why is that? I'm like, well, think about it. If you're talking to your partner and you're like, what do we want for dinner tonight? Do we want Italian? We had Italian the other day, or this. What about Asian food? Right? And you're like, oh, yeah, no, that sounds good. You'll go through Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, but hardly are you like, I'm down for some Filipino food.
Yeah.
The only time that you'll feel that way is if you live in like a densely populated, like a Filipinos place, like the Bay Area maybe, or like New York City in some regions, in some neighborhoods. But you don't really think immediately. Like if I'm feeling Asian food, I'm gonna think like Chinese takeout, or
Yeah.
like I'm gonna get some sushi or a bento box or something, right? Um, so we're not in pop culture in that way yet, which is just so funny and interesting because it's like, how many Miss New Universes have we had re in the recent history have been Filipino? You know, like things like that, right? Like, so there's that. How many music artists are either part Filipino or Filipino
Yeah.
that are really, really immensely popular? There's a like silent humility to being Filipino that I think is just so ingrained in all of us. And I think it comes from like ages and ages of colonization. But like there's just a lot of industries Filipinos have their hands in. And a big one is like, you know, our biggest export are people. So the Filipino diaspora is insane. We're everywhere. And it's generally in roles of hospitality or medical. So chances are you've had a nurse that is Filipino. Like that is like a stereotype that is absolutely true. Um, but, you know, like because of the way that we are, we tend to not only like suffer silently, we also celebrate really silently. And for me, it was like kind of a personal mission, and it's also been a mission of Jane and Trisha's to like take that power and be like, no,
Mhm.
we are worthy of space in, you know, whatever conversation there may be. And so it's been our mission to be like, you know, it's cool to talk about Filipino food. And I think we've succeeded in many
Yeah.
ways. And you know, maybe one day we can have more than one, you know, Michelin-starred Filipino restaurant, like
Yeah.
Kasama's first and only Michelin-starred Filipino restaurant in Chicago. Um, but you know, I think that there's just like a really, really huge opportunity for all of us to put a little bit extra effort to take up that space and, you know, celebrate loudly.
Yeah. Also, I'm really loud, so I'm on board and I'm going to celebrate with you. Seriously, I so agree. Like up and coming, yeah, let's make Filipino food arrive and like put it in the forefront. So, I'll be as
Yes.
loud as you need me to, Nori. Um I love you so much. We're going to wrap up and get to the final 3, which I already know these answers. They may have changed since I chatted with you last. Best advice you've ever been given.
I thought about this after because you know, I was so publicly unprepared when you asked me. So I was like,
Whatever. You were fabulous.
Trish sent it as an email. I must have not read it.
It's
Man.
okay. I sent a lot.
Yeah. I think like it still is you know, the advice of really not being afraid of no. And
Mm,
just really, you know, like that's one thing that, you know, my mom, my siblings have sort of just like my oldest siblings have like always kind of like ingrained in me is you're not going to get something if you don't ask for it.
yeah.
You know, and so the answer is always going to be no if you don't ask for it, right? It will always be no. So what are you afraid of? If it's already no that you're not asking for it, ask for it and take the chance on yes. And so that's always been, you know, words that I live by. It's advice I've been given in, you know, not so succinct words, but it's what I've been with what I've known, what I've lived on. And honestly, I didn't realize this, but it's profound to other people who are afraid of rejection.
Mm,
And so I think it really is take the advice of just like don't be afraid of no.
yeah.
Because yes, be hiding right behind it.
Yeah. Make the ask. I used to say that all the
Yeah.
time. Make the ask. Just do it.
Right.
What's your happy place?
My happy place is the same as I told you then, and that is home with my dogs. And I mean, it could be and should be, you know, traveling with my dogs too, but really home is where they are. Like they're my husband's and my entire heart. Like
Mm-hmm.
our lives revolve around them. And I wish places were more accommodating to well-behaved, very clean dogs like
Mm-hmm.
mine. Because I'm like, I know children who are dirtier and less behaved than my dogs are. So,
100%.
you know, like it's like planes are like that to me. I'm like, man, why can't I fly with them?
Yeah.
But yeah, really, really my happy place is home, and home is where my dogs are.
Love it. Yeah. We'll go somewhere and it's like no dogs allowed. And I'm like, but you allow kids.
I know. Like, have you touched their hands? They're sticky. I guarantee they're sticky.
Yeah, I would love to take my dogs. I love them so much, but one's a total dick, so we can't. So we just leave them at home. But yes, yes, home is one of my favorite places to be because they're here. So I agree with
Yes.
you 100%. In all things food and drink, what do you crave? What always sounds good to you?
What always sounds good to me is, we talked about it earlier, talked about it then, is Oregon water. It is like if you don't experience it, you don't know what you're missing out on. And it's just, we're so spoiled. This comes out of our tap. It's so
Yeah.
good. You don't even need to filter it,
Nope.
like it is just good how it is. It's better than whatever bottled thing they're gonna bring you. It's what makes our food delicious and it's what makes our produce so
Hmm.
fantastic. Like Oregon water, there's magic in it. There's some magic
It's why the
that's
wine
like
tastes so good. I mean,
mind exactly. It literally all comes back to
hmm
to Oregon rainwater, just
hmm
water.
yeah. Okay,
And then
food.
for food, I mean, I always crave salt. I'm like, I
Yeah.
love salt. Like obviously carbs, but not in like the bread sense, not the
Uh-huh.
Western sense. I'm always craving rice and noodles. Like that will always be good to me is rice. I mean, I will just eat a bowl of plain rice. I don't care. Like it's so good.
Hmm.
Um, and tropical fruit, because I want what I can't have. And when you live in the Pacific Northwest, there's no way you're getting fresh mangoes and pineapple, like I can back home. So I always crave tropical fruit. But I would say, like those are the things that like no matter what day it is, whatever I'm going through, those are going to be foods that I want.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I mean, the water here, you can taste. If I go somewhere, I know that they're on a well. I can taste
I
it.
know. Oh yeah, totally.
It's the
Totally.
best. It's the best. What also is the best is you, my friend. I am so glad we connected in July. Again, I'll say it, there's just people in this world that you meet and you light up, right?
Yeah.
You just light up instantly when you meet them. And then every time after that, when you see them, you just light up. So it is my mission in life to surround myself with people who light up when they see me coming and then vice versa.
I mean, it's only natural. I mean, Trish, you walk in, you're hard to miss. You have that fiery red hair. You have the legs that literally go for days. I'm just like, who is this woman? And then you smile, and then I'm just like, okay, are you my friend? Can you be my friend?
Yeah. Yeah, we're
So,
friends. Friends for life. Friends for life, Nori. It's been so amazing to talk to you and then just get to know you. And I'm rooting for you and all the things that you do. And if you need a loudmouth to shout some things out to the world, girl, I'm here. I'm
I
loud.
mean, ditto. And I could always use a loud mouth to talk shit with.
Yeah.
So, you
I'm
know,
definitely yes. Yeah, over a glass of wine. Let's do it.
exactly, exactly. So I'm excited to see you again soon.
You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Close. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.